Coaches, are you ready to revolutionize your game preparation? For the past 5 seasons, coaches across the nation have been using the ultimate scout team game changer, the Coachpad. Imagine this: no more scrambling on weekends to prep scout cards, no more fumbling with paper and binders. Whether you're drawing your cards digitally with a computer program or sketching them by hand, the Coachpad is your all in one solution. Picture yourself on the practice field effortlessly managing your scout team or standing on the sidelines during game day, syncing adjustments from the press box to your coaches on the sideline and back. With the coach pad, you can clearly see your scout cards even in the brightest sunlight. No more squinting or dealing with the wind blowing clear vinyl sleeves everywhere. This offseason, take your coaching to the next level. Get your coach pad today at thecoachpad.com and gear up for a winning season ahead.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have the DC at Lakota West High School here in the great state of Ohio. Coach Tyler Huls. Coach, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing good, Coach. It was good talking to you for 20, 30 minutes before we got on. And so like I said, for those watch us now, I don't know off the top of my head when this will post, but this is Chris break, usually when I do my mass filming. So Coach and I are trying to recover from a long couple days of kids and family and all that. Before we get started, Coach, how did you end up as the DC at Lakota West?
Well, I'm originally from Indiana, and I played at Franklin College in Indianapolis, D3 ball. And then when I graduated, I went back to my hometown, Salem, Indiana. We were there for 5 years. I actually met my wife at a coaching clinic in Cincinnati, the Glazier Clinic. We went out for some drinks afterwards and met my wife the old school way at a bar. And, when we lived in Indiana, she was ready to get back home. And so when I moved over here, I actually took a year off of teaching. I was frustrated with, the lack of growth that I had in Indiana. So I took a year off and decided I needed to get back into it. And then I was at Norwood High School for a year. And that entire time that I had lived over here in Cincinnati, I had been blowing up Coach Bolden's cell phone, like, hey, I need a job, I need a job, I need a job. And, nothing ever worked out. And then he got the job at Lakota West, and I just happened to be a Glazier clinic he was speaking at. And basically went up and talked to him at the bar, and he said, come over, let's have a conversation when we get back in town. So I did, and I got the outside linebacker coaching position. And I worked for Carlton Gray, who's the D coordinator at Winton Woods, for 2 years. I really learned a lot under him, being a former NFL guy. And then when he took the Winton Woods job, approached Coach B, and I'm technically a co-defense coordinator. A guy that he had at Coleraine is the other co-DC. And now I think I'm in year 4 of being the D coordinator. So a lot of luck, but it's been great.
Now, again, like we talked a little bit, but how would you describe, again, we all evolve every year a little bit, but how would you describe kind of the base you guys use at Lakota? Because you guys have done a good job at rebuilding Lakota back to where it kind of used to be. A playoff contender, like obviously a good regular season record with that after a little bit of a dip. What would you describe as kind of your base defense and kind of your process to putting that together over the past several years?
So under Carlton, we played a ton of coverages, but I would say that we played a lot of cover 1, cover 3, and we played some quarters, but it wasn't like the new quarter. I shouldn't say new quarters, but it wasn't the quarters that we play now. And then my first year, it was very similar. We played a lot of cover 3 and cover 1, and we brought a lot of pressure. And then as I, watching different podcasts or listening to different podcasts, and like Coach Vass, I listen to his defensive podcast a lot. The Nate Woody system, the slanting and the angling, and then playing quarters behind that. That was in year 2 of being the DC. I really dove into that quarters, and we started playing a lot more quarters in year 2, and I would say that's our base defense now. We play palms, and then that's really when we're bringing a boundary reduction. So we're bringing the outside backer from the boundary. Um, that's when we play quarters. And then if we want to bring our field outside backer, we're going to play cover 3, maybe 3 cloud every once in a while. Not a lot of cover 1 anymore, just because our personnel is different than it was my first couple of years. We play a lot more zone. But I mean, the general basis of it is if we're bringing our outside backer from the boundary because we set our front to the field, we're going to play quarters. And then if we're going to bring our strong outside backer from the field, we're going to roll and play cover 3.
I've heard, Coach. Like I said, kind of. I mean, with that structure, I mean, you've kind of mentioned it's evolved a little bit, at least secondary wise. But how's it? Again, I know you don't do a lot of fronts, but how has your front half also evolved over the course of that period, or has it at all, or have you been able to just stay? Hey, back end is really what's going to change for us. Our front end is going to, for the most part, stay the same.
Um, our front typically stays the same. Now we do more now where, like, if we want to get into an underfront, what we call it is we say, like, our base call is week 4. And if we want to get, which essentially is an underfront, but we're moving to it. So if we want to line up in an underfront, we just call week show. So the kids know I'm just going to show where I would end up post snap. And that's how we can get into our underfront. If we want to get into an overfront, we'll call strong show. And then the weak outside backer to the boundary, he'll step off in apex because he's typically down on the line of scrimmage. But if we want to get into an over and under front, we just call weak or strong show, and the kids know that we're just going to line up where we would be getting to post snap. And we'll get into like a bear front in short yardage distance, or we might get into a 5-1 bear in 3rd and long. But for the most part, it's typically a 4-0-4. And then we may bump into like 4 eyes in a tight front every once in a while based off game plan. But for the most part, our front pretty much stays the same. Want our kids to not have to think that much and be able to play fast. I think that's when we've been the most successful, is when our kids know what they're doing. And so just switching up which backer's coming from the field or the boundary typically is what we do best. Obviously, it's our base, so it should be what we do best. But we're able to keep offenses guessing as to where we're coming from, and I think that really helps us. And so, when we install stuff, we spend a week or 2 just on our base defenses, and then little nuances that we may add or add as the weeks go and game plan.
Now, you mentioned staying right there during your install with your base just for about a week. What is that summer install? I mean, obviously we have so much time now, and we got a lot of time. COVID, then they took it away, and now they're slowly giving us more and more back. To pretty much, I mean, at this point, I'm not saying we have unlimited days, but if you structure it right, I mean, it's pretty close. I mean, between 7-on-7s we're allowed to do in the off season, that how they've adjusted the 7-man rule to where it's not just 7 people, it's 7 per coach. Again, whole different rabbit hole. But what does that process, especially in the summer, look like for you of installing at least your base and your initial defense throughout the summer? What does that process kind of look like?
So this season it was a little bit different, just because we had different personnel. We basically came in and said, all right, there's 3 or 4 things that we want to get done. And so we go Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the summer. And to be honest, June, we don't do much football. I mean, we're lifting, doing agilities, things like that. But I mean, we install every morning. Now, what we do on the field, it may not be that much with that. It just kind of goes based off how the lift and the workout goes. Like, I may install our base defense the whole first week. And we may not do much with that on the field, but it's all film and diagrams and what I put together on Huddle. And so, like I said, we'll spend probably a week on just our base defense, left and right, or weak and strong, talking about cover 4, talking about cover 3. What are our checks, what happens with motion, things like that. And that really sets the foundation for everything else we do. And then like this year, in the past, when we've brought 5-man pressures, we would play cover 1. Well, we didn't really think we had the personnel to do that this year. So when we started installing our 5-man pressures, which was fire zone coverage, we spent a whole week and a half on that, just because that coverage is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. And if we did do drills, all of our drills were focused around the fire zone pressures, and dropping correctly and relating to different receivers correctly. And then the next week we got into our nickel coverage. And so one of the things that I did a couple of years ago was I really dove into the creepers package. Like Adam Gaylor has a lot of great podcasts out there, a lot of stuff that Dave Aranda did. So we dove into that, and we'll spend another week and a half on that. And that's a whole different front for us. But when we're in that, the coverage doesn't really change. That's when the front changes for us. Most of our creepers are cover 3. So that first week of our base install, when we cover 3, that all relates back to our creeper package. And so we really spend like a week and a half on like almost every part of our playbook. And then our entire practice, when we get to do football stuff, evolves around what we just went over in the classroom. And so we do that. And then as we get into like our team camp and stuff, we'll go back and we'll restart it, install number 1. So I've got it broken down to install 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever it may be. And then we'll go through that in the summer. And then once we get our team camp, 2-a-days and stuff like that, we go back to install 1. And then that's a little bit faster process. Maybe the first day of team camp, we do install number 1. Second day, we do install 2. And it's just coming back to it, reiterating some of the small facts that maybe we've not touched on in a while. Because like I said, we don't do a lot of football stuff in June, but we do install everything in June.
Okay. Now, with the installation process, how do you break up your staff positionally for a breakup? Because everybody, some people just have just straight one DB coach or DB and assistant DB coach. Others have a corners coach and a safeties coach. Again, you talked Nate Woody 3-4. Well, when you're in a 3-4, do you have an inside and outside? But again, you get where I'm going with this question.
Yeah.
How are you breaking up your defensive staff in terms of who's where and teaches what and so forth?
So we're pretty fortunate. We have a lot of coaches. So myself and the other co-DC, we just we get to roam a lot, because we have a safeties coach, we have a corners coach, we have an inside backers coach, we have an outside backers coach, and we have 2 D-line coaches. So every position has their own position coach. But because we don't have everybody in the building and not everybody has the summers off, there may be one day where I have to go coach D-line, or I may have to take inside linebackers or outside linebackers. My co-DC, Phil Joseph, he kind of handles the secondary, so he may have the safeties and the corners one day. He may just have the safeties or just the corners. But we have a position coach for each group, and then based off the needs, vacations and things like that, we're the 2 guys that can float around to where we need to be. So when we're installing, we're all together in the auditorium on the big screen, but each group is sitting with their position coaches. And as I'm going over the installs that day, the position coaches are talking quietly in their individual groups, little things that maybe I didn't hit on in the overall scheme as we're installing.
Yeah, no, perfect. That's always, and again, I know you're D1 and much bigger than D1 resources are drastically different. I've been there, like I said, drastically different world. but still, like, it's always an interesting perspective of how people try to move, because it's always nice when you are the DC, the ability to be able to roam
Yeah.
and fix little things or pull kids aside or observe and take notes and so forth. So
Yeah, it's been nice because there's, in years past when we didn't have this many coaches, like there was one year where I was coaching the inside linebackers and the outside linebackers. Well, there's two totally different positions in the 3-4. And then, I didn't get to ever go see the D line. So then once we added coaches and I was able to go spend some time with the D line that day, they were like, "Oh, coach is never here. This is nice." And it just brings another voice. Our D line coach is harping on them, and then I come in and say the same thing, and they're like, "Okay, maybe this is important."
no, you're right. Like I said, I had that luxury when I was at Elgin. I was able to float because we had enough coaches that were good at what they did. So I was able to go where I was either needed that day, or I could
Yeah,
pull specific people and do certain things or help. And um, like I said, allowed me to mess with free safeties and cover three, which is always fun for me.
yeah,
Because again, that's completely different than corners, and that's just it's just
and it's nice when if you're game planning something, and the outside backers and the inside backers, they if they have something specific that's new that week, I can go take time with them and the inside linebacker coach, to help or assist. We have a lot of kids, and so there'll be times where I trust all my coaches. I might just say, "Hey, you take the old guys, I'll work with the young guys for the indie period." That way you can get a little bit more detailed with them, and these 5 or 6 kids aren't just standing there while you're working with them. And I love taking the young guys and working with them just because I don't get to do that a lot. I don't get to go to many JV games. My kid plays on Saturday mornings, so if I can spend time with them during the week and let my coaches coach, that's I think it speaks volumes, and I think the kids like that I'm able to do that. So
speaking of young guys, is your how are your freshmen and JV separate from you guys? Are they all together with you? Is freshman complete? How does that structure work with your staff as well?
um, in the summer, the freshmen are with us until about mid-July. And that's nice because they kind of get to see us install the defense. But the freshmen, they'll split off and they have their own freshman team. And once they split off, I teach in the freshman building, so I see the kids, but like we don't really have much, we don't do anything with them football wise. And they run our defense, but it may be a little bit different, based off their needs and what they can do. But the freshmen, they're a separate team. The JV, they're with us, the entire practice. And then we started towards the end of the season this year, once we would go, because we always do like a team versus ones period, best 6, 7 plays, offense, defense, and we would let the JV guys go do same thing, and so then they would split off. But for the most part, they're with us. JV's with us all the time.
Okay. Now you also hit on their game planning, and this is a giant rabbit hole question in itself, and you know this because I mean, there's 80 billion different ways I can go with this, and you can go with this. Broadly speaking, what does your kind of game planning process look like? Obviously, you have your base structure, your defense. At this point, the teams you're playing are not tremendously changing a lot offensively.
No,
We're just being honest. Like, I mean, I was skimming your schedule the other day, and when we were talking earlier, I mean, you saw St. X twice this year. I mean, looking at this schedule, most of these schools have not changed head coaches outside of like two of them in years. So obviously you have a good idea. Even the playoff teams you saw haven't really changed. So what is that process, especially when you're very familiar with who you're seeing? Um, what does that kind of process look like for you guys in terms of game planning? Say, I mean, Friday night after you're done with your game to like the following Thursday.
well, like you said, I think it's tremendously easier to game plan and do what we do at the level that we're at than a small school. I was at a small school for 5 years. and you may see wing T, triple option, spread, and that's not the case at our level, which is kind of nice. But really, our conference trades film every Wednesday, and we just trade every game that we have. So that process really starts that day. Once I'm done, making scout cards, whatever it may be, I pretty much do all the breakdown for formation and play, just because I like to do that and it helps me um, see things. And so, that process starts on Wednesday, and the goal is to have all those games done by Saturday morning. And then that way we can just break down one game on the weekend, and we can start forming a plan. So Friday after the game, we do whatever. Saturday morning we come in and we lift as a team on Saturday morning. We watch the previous game the night before, and then the kids are done for the weekend. And we're kind of unique just because, like, I have small kids. Our co-DC has small kids, and they're on different football schedules for the weekend. So, some days or some weeks it may be we meet as a defensive staff on Sunday morning. Sometimes it's Sunday evening. But we'll break down based on the opponent. We'll break down at least 3 games, and some games we'll do more, and that becomes easier as you go on throughout the season. But we'll come in as a staff, and we got our whiteboard in the coach's office, and we basically put the top 10 formations on the board. We make a hit chart on the board, and then we go formation to formation. And what calls do we like versus this formation? What calls do we like versus this formation? And then we look for what carries over, because we really want to go into a game with what we call PAR downs, pass and run downs. We want to have about 8 calls for that. And then once we've built that out and we see what marries together, then we'll go into a third down package. And same thing, we want to have about 5 calls for our third down package. And then from there, it's throughout the week we'll add some stuff. But once we have our pass and run downs, our third down package, then we'll go to our formations. We're like, all right, we need to have a check for this formation, and sometimes that may be 2 checks. Like, here's what we're going to start with. Here's what we're going to change up if it doesn't go the way that we think it needs to go, or that we thought it was going to go. Or maybe we just want to have a different look for the team that we're playing versus these 2 formations. And so really, 8 calls for our pass and run downs, 5 calls for our third down package, and then what checks do we need to build in? What formation is going to give us problems schematically? Because there's, in a 5-2-3-4, there's always a couple formations that give you some issues. And so, we've been doing this for 4 years now, so we kind of have a feel for it. And, part of that is we'll go back and we save all of our scout packets on Google Drive. So we can say, all right, what did we do last year? Was it successful? Can we do this again? Or what kind of minor changes do we want to make off our checks from last year? But that's really the process. It's pretty simple. Like I said, we want to make it as simple for the kids as possible. So I feel like 8 calls on our pass and run downs, that's for a defense where we only have one-way players. Like, I think that's a happy number. Now, we may not run all of those in the game, but we want to make sure that we always have a change up to something, in case one of the things that we thought of didn't work well. And then throughout the week, like Tuesday for us is Tuesday and Wednesdays are big days for inside run, outside perimeter periods. And so Tuesday is we focus primarily on our base calls. So bring in the boundary reduction or bring in the field backer. And then, we have a couple calls that we'll do off of that. We'll make like a pop call where our outside backer spikes up underneath the B gap and our DN goes outside. And so we'll work those in on Tuesday. But Tuesday is really just, hey, these are their top runs, and let's run that versus our base defense. And then Wednesday, we'll bring in some of those other calls that we like. Hey, versus this formation. We want to bring this 5-man pressure. We like it. So let's practice that in inside run, perimeter, and team. And then Thursday, we go back Thursday and we're like, all right, maybe we don't need this call. Maybe we do need this call. Let's take it off. And then we kind of go back to, let's run all the calls that we like versus this formation in our team period that we do on Thursday.
Yeah. Now with the game planning and installing of the game plan, do you just present it to the kids Monday? Do you send it out on Huddle? Do you send it out Google Classroom, Google Drive? How do you present the game planning portion to the kids without overloading them? Because as we all know, the D lineman listening to your coverage adjustments is not necessarily really interested in that aspect of life at that point. So how are you approaching that with the kids in terms of your game planning facet?
So every kid gets not every kid, I should say, our ones and our 1As, they get a hard copy of the scout packet. And then and then I put it on Huddle for everyone else to see. But Monday, really, we go through everything in the classroom, and we'll watch film. And then we go out on the field and we walk through everything. And then we always have a walkthrough period at the beginning of the day, at the beginning of the practice. And so then, like I said, similar on Tuesday, like we're going to walk through those calls that we're going to do that day, specific to that day. So our base stuff, our base, our checks. And then Wednesday, we're going to walk through those other calls that we go back that are maybe new, or something that we just haven't ran in a while, or it's formation specific. We'll walk through that because those are going to be the 5 to 10 calls that we focus on that day. So our walkthrough periods every day, we have a walkthrough every day, are focused on, all right, these are the calls and the formations that we're going to walk or practice today. Let's walk through it. And then we film practice. So then I can go back in and I can make specific notes of that day. And if we need to hit something again the next day, I'll make a note in Huddle. Hey, this is what it should look like. We'll run this again tomorrow and try to fix that.
Yeah, that makes sense, Coach. Kyle, I do want to go back to, because you mentioned blitzing, and a friend of ours is always curious about it, and I've kind of become too. How are you teaching blitzes? And I'm not necessarily saying, okay, like, what are you calling this or that? Like, your actual process for teaching the blitz is that, do you have a blitz period? Do you like how do you teach the techniques? How do you approach certain things? Because again, especially at your level, you're getting more advanced into pass protections. You're getting more advanced into certain looks you're seeing. Whereas when you get down to the D5, 6, 7 level, most teams might have one protection scheme, maybe two. But your level, again, you have a little more variety in pass protections. You need to be a little more detailed with your blitzing. And you kind of mentioned, how are you approaching teaching blitzing to your kids?
So a lot of our blitzes, I'll hit on how I got this from St. X a couple years ago. The first thing that we do is all of our blitzes are colleges. And then if we want to bring a safety or a corner, then it becomes a mascot for that college. So the blitz pattern is the same. It's just who's coming is different. So for instance, Bama is a run blitz for us, and it's a cross dog with the two inside linebackers. If we want to bring a safety as the wrap blitzer, then we would just name that Tide. Or the old NCAA blitz, the outside backer off the edge, the DN long stick into A and the Mike through the B. That's Cincy for us, and then we would name that Bearcat if we want to bring the strong safety off the edge rather than the outside backer. And I think that was one of the greatest things that we changed when I took over, just because the kids know the pattern, and it doesn't really change for anybody. It's just who's coming and who's not coming. So that's the first thing that we do. And then, we also talk about, we have certain blitzes that, in my opinion, they're run blitzes, and certain blitzes that are pass blitzes. And so, we spend time and install and walk through, like, hey, this is a run pressure. You guys have to understand and communicate on the field, what's the down distance? When do we like to run this blitz? So like Oregon for us is the old saw dog, both outside backers basically blitz into a bear front. That's a run blitz for us typically. And so we communicate that in walkthroughs and in installs. And by the time that the season starts, the kids understand what pressures go with what. The other thing that we'll do is we'll tag blitzes. So like if a team's gonna slide the line one way and the back's gonna protect off the edge, we'll tag our blitz so that they run the blitz to the back. So we might just say, hey, Cincy back. That tells our kids, all right, we're gonna bring the pressure to the back. And so we'll tag blitzes like that. We teach landmarks on the quarterback. Our two outside pressures should be, the numbers. Our two interior blitzers are going to be up the number near them, and then or the upfield number, and then the guy that's come down the center, he's kind of like the bullseye, because we really struggled this year with passing lanes, our rush lanes, and guys kind of just doing their own thing, and so we really focused on, all right, I'm the upfield shoulder, I'm the backside shoulder, I'm the near number, I'm the bullseye on our blitz. And we're big on avoiding blockers. One of the greatest things I learned as a player is if I'm undersized and I got a big guy in front of me, and we really relate it to basketball sometimes. Make it look like you're giving a crossover and step one way and then rip across his face. But then there are times where we teach that if the quarterback is right in front of you and there's linemen, there's not a lot of space. Me bull rushing might be the best thing just to get that guy off his spot. But our backers, anytime they're blitzing, we'll probably bull rush a running back. But if we're blitzing off of a lineman, we're trying to time it up, and we really want to avoid, but then we want to retrace our steps so that we're not creating a lane. But I would say, for the most part, like we didn't blitz a lot this year just because our D line were so big and struggled with contain. But for the most part, we tag our blitzes so that the guys don't really have to do that much thinking, and then we can kind of dictate based off what their pass pro is. All right, on third down, I'm expecting this. Well, let's tag this blitz so we can run it where we want to run it.
Okay. No, perfect, coach. Like I said, I was just curious. Again, everybody has a different perspective on how to do that. And some, again, different levels, depends on how in depth people get into it and what they do. Is there anything like when you're calling blitzes, just out of curiosity during a game, is there anything in particular you're looking for? Is it a lot more down distance and their scouting report? Is it identifying the protections as the game goes? How do you kind of determine that as you're going throughout your game?
We're not a big, we don't really blitz to stop the run that often, but so a couple years ago, we were playing Princeton, and they're semi option and spread at the same time, and the blitz that I was calling what we call Cincy, and it was just forcing our guys to fit the correct way. Like the way that the play was designed and our defense was designed, we should have been doing that without me having to call the blitz, because they were reading our defensive end and then pitching off of him, or pitching off our outside backer. Well, I couldn't get my mic to trigger, and so then we just started calling the blitz so that we would fit that the way that it should have fit without calling the pressure. But we were just kind of in sand and standing there. So if we're seeing something like that where, okay, this is how this should fit, but we're not doing it, well, let's just call that pressure for the kids on the down and distance that we're expecting it. So that's one way. On third down, third and medium, we're gonna blitz. We're gonna draw something up that week And that, like I said, we got 3 or 4 calls that we like on third down. So that's going to dictate when we call something. Um, but for the most part, like our cross dog, we'll call that because we weren't, if a team's running zone, we're trying to cut the ball off and force it to bounce so that our scraping backer is there, and then our outside backer, we kind of got him viced. Um, and we'll call some stuff to stop power. And that would be based off down and distance and their tendencies that we're seeing. Like I think we do a pretty good job with our kids of talking about tendencies, and they know what's coming. Our Will linebacker, who was a senior this year, man, he put more time into film than any player I've ever coached. And they would come out in a formation, and he would be barking out the three plays that they would run out of that formation, right, pre-snap. And so a lot of our stuff is based off down and distance and the tendencies that we see. We try to pay close attention to personnel, because I think a lot of the teams that we play, personnel dictates, or personnel relates to 4 or 5 call plays that they'll run out of that. And then so we might bring pressure based off of that as well. We get a lot of wide zone to the boundary. And so one of the things that we've started doing, because we gave up like 450 yards of rushing to Jordan Marshall his junior year, and it was all off wide zone. And so we just tried to build a wall and let our backers flow. Well, next thing you know, he's cutting back for 70, and we don't have anybody there. So then we went back to the drawing board last year, and we talked to Joe Bolden, he was the co-DC out at Tulsa, before Kevin Wilson got let go, and was Coach Tom Bolden's nephew, and our D-line coach is his dad. So it's an easy connection. But Joe's a good football coach, and we really asked him, like, what do you do that gives you success versus wide zone? And he said, we want to build a wall and we want to bring pressure into it. So last year and then this year, anytime that we played like a Moeller or a St. X, somebody that got under center and would like to run wide zone to the boundary, we're bringing a corner into it. And we're telling, our guys, hey, we're going to build a wall. We're going to get vertical into this thing so that he has to make a decision right now and either stick his foot in the ground and cut back, or I should have a backer flowing and fitting, or more times than not, it honestly is a tackle for loss because that corner never gets accounted for. And so I would say that's probably the one thing that over the years that we've changed in game scheme or game plan, that, when we're bringing a pressure, we're blitzing into something to cut it off, so that our inside backers can kind of flow. And it's typically not an inside backer on a blitz. It's typically that overhang, or maybe even that corner or the safety off the edge, where we can get extra numbers to cut that thing off, because that's wide zone has really given us a lot of fits, and that corner pressure has really helped us.
Well, you can blame the NFL, Nick Duty, and most of college for the wide zone phenomenon. So,
oh man, it was
yeah.
and there's 2 ways to look at it. Like, I get the building the wall, and we've had success with that, but really when we've had more success is we're bringing pressure, and we're building the wall right now, rather than trying to string that thing out to the sideline where he may find a crease outside, he may find a crease backside. And so that, I guess, to answer your question in a roundabout way, I would say down and distance and tendency has more to do with when we call pressures. Just in my opinion, we've been burned sometimes from bringing pressure on rundowns. So I would rather, focus on our base defense, because our guys are comfortable in that. And then, if that's not working, then we'll start dialing some stuff up. But typically, we don't bring a lot of pressure on rundowns if we don't have to.
Yeah. My last question for you, and this is a topic I've started hitting on with both offense and defense coaches this offseason, is what is in terms of like again, you mentioned essentially you guys are a base 3-4 Nate Woody-ish scheme, like at the core. Um, so when and I know you take a lot of, because you guys usually play late in November, you take a lot of December off. What does your off season look like in terms of adding, subtracting, looking at your scheme from like January to June 1? What does that kind of process look for you? Because again, you have a long season, you get done around Thanksgiving break. Obviously, Christmas happens, 30 days no contact. But what it for you and as a defensive staff, what does y'all's process look at, like at evaluating not only what you guys did, but okay, how can we continue to evolve this 3-4 that we've developed, this base, and going into the next season?
I think it really depends on your personnel. This year we replaced 7 starters on defense, which is probably the most that we've ever replaced. And so we kind of went into this season, thinking it's not going to be as complex as what it's been in the past, just because we have 7 new faces, and 3 of those new faces were in the secondary. In the past, we've ran 6 or 7 different coverages throughout the season, and this year we didn't really do that. We kind of hung our hats on cover 3, cover 4, and fire zone coverage, and just wanted to keep it simple. And so I think a lot of it is based off our personnel that we have coming back, and here's the guys that we think are going to start, and here's the guys that we think are going to contribute. What fits them best. And so, like I said, this year we were a little bit bigger up front than we've ever been, and we just didn't move as well. So we did like I hit on earlier, like the weak show and the strong show. We hit on that, or we did that a little bit more than we have in the past, because we just weren't great at angling. And so that's what I look at first. Like I said, I listen to a ton of podcasts and, buy a ton of courses on CoachTube and all of that. And, like the Cody Alexanders and all those guys are great. You can see new defensive trends. And so I'll look at that and be like, all right, what can we do from that fits in our scheme that we already have? Or how can we tweak that a little bit to fit what we do? And so that's really where it starts. And then, as you're going throughout the summer and you're installing these things, what we've started with on day one, we may realize it doesn't fit with our personnel, and we may not ever do that again. We may be like, all right, that is not good for us. It does not fit what we do. And so we really just try to fit what we do based off the strengths of our players. And so if I'm, researching, going to clinics and things like that, I'm trying to find little things that fit similar to what we do, or how can I adjust that just a little bit to add that? Because like I said, there's a ton of resources out there now, more than there ever has been. I mean, you can find playbooks of, Alabama and Georgia, and scour through those and find little things. And I've picked up things from that I like, or watching podcasts like yours. Like, it's just finding things that work for us and fit our personnel that are similar to what we do. And I guess that's really the process. I'm kind of a football nerd, man. Like I love listening to podcasts, and I might buy a CoachTube course that has nothing to do with what we do, but like I want to go listen and learn about it. And I think that really has what's made me evolve as a coach. And it's been great for additions to our defense. Like I said, our nickel package is, the whole NFL QB creeper package that everybody does now. Like we'll bring Favre and Breeze, and that was something that I literally just researched and learned on the line, and we just made sure that it was a focus, and we really dove into it as a staff, the little details of all the calls, and then I mean, I'll say, I'll be honest, it was not great the first year that we did it, but then it was a good package for us the second year because we were more comfortable as coaches and our kids were more comfortable because it was something that we had spent time on. But yeah, just watching podcasts, seeing trends, seeing things that we can change, or, there's a ton of guys that run our defense out there. So how do they coach that? What Chad McGee, that's down in Alabama, he's got a ton of podcasts on this defense and coach tube courses. And so I go and I look, how do they coach it? Does he do it a better way than we do it? And so, if there's something I like, I'm going to steal it. And, that's kind of the process. Go back, see what went well for us, what didn't go well for us. Do we need to have this call? I mean, we've really slimmed down our playbook in terms of calls that we run. I felt like our first couple of years we would just put pressures in to put pressures in. It was like, well, why are we putting this in? Because we called it 3 times last year. And so we don't really do that anymore. We try to find our base calls, our base pressures, our base nickel package calls, our base dime calls, and then start small and build those as the season goes if we need to.
Okay. Well, coach's Twitter will be in the bio. Give Coach a follow. Reach out to him if you want to talk to him more in depth on what they kind of do. Like, share, subscribe, all that algorithm crap, so people can find stuff that YouTube says you have to do, whatever. You can see how enthusiastic I am about that, Coach. And then check out our sponsor, Coachpad. Otherwise, that is in our episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.